Chapter 4. The human that had been Silver Inkman, envoy, diplomatic, and self-satisfied bureaucrat, died on the floor of his ship that day, even as fire fell on the planet and rage filled a soul used to complacency. What arose was new, stumbling, and poisoned by alien technology, a technology older than his species. Even as it strived to understand him, it was swamped by 1,000,000 years of instincts and a body broken by circumstance, and with a completely different set of priorities. Height dragged himself from the floor and groped his way to the door. His once shattered right arm now glowed with an alien light, his heart now beating to an unfamiliar rhythm, but his self, the part of him that insisted that it was human, did what humans always do and sought help. It looked for company, compassion, and sympathy, and he remembered where to find it. The open court of the arboreals was nearly empty, the council having fled after the row with the envoy and then to discover the cause of the new catastrophe. The only one remaining was the now disgraced leader, Master Oak, their former leader and creator. He heard the stumbling, archaic human arrive, the one who had ruined him and was, no doubt, somehow responsible for the fire burning this new world. He didn't turn, simply stayed watching the smoke-filled sky sweep past. "Envoy Silver, you came back. Don't you think you have done enough damage already?" He turned ready to give the rest of his speech until he saw what he was talking to. A thing, covered in blood, glowing like a sun, was burning inside. Faceless, simply a squirming mass of gold. He fell back in surprise and fear, and then it spoke. "Silver, yes, I am Silver. I require silver. Now, or the burning will not stop." Master Oak assumed it was a threat and was already hostile, and now faced with a monster, he began banging his chest, summoning anyone nearby to his aid. On any other day, the world itself would have answered his call, but now, on this day, no one cared. Some were trying to rescue themselves, the better ones were trying to rescue others. No one had time for an unmasked fascist, a manipulator, and now a shame that had soiled their very beginning. The wind carried the contempt of his people amongst the smell of burning to him. Some were questions. Why was he not here, organizing, defending his people? Shame held him in his spot even as a monster faced him. He shook his leaves and prepared for the end, a solution to all his problems becoming suddenly clear as he decided to die a hero. A miserable end for one such as him, but better than living in shame for centuries to come. Immortality was now for others, and he no longer wanted it. The thing wanted silver. There was plenty in the treasury, along with the weapons he would never permit his people to own. A minor metal held only for its antibacterial and conductive properties. It was a byproduct of the lead extraction that was more important. He tried to keep his voice level. "Silver, I have all you want. Follow me." He pushed his fingers into the gen-locked door and it swung open. Without looking back, he swept forward, trying to recall where he had stored the weapon he wanted to use. It probably would have enraged him further if he knew that Silver had ignored everything he had said, that he hadn't even registered in the tormented mind that Silver Wisp had become. Only the promise of metal pushed him forward. In his battered and drugged mind, he thought more silver would make him silver again, as if it was a touchstone of his identity, and not simply a nickname that he had embraced. He was beyond all logic at this point. He stumbled through the doorway and half fell down the steep steps that led to a cavernous room. Something in his scattered brain registered that the thing that had opened the door for him was missing, and that it wasn't a friend. He ignored it, but the new self that was currently striving to understand everything knew what a threat was and prepared for battle. His subconscious now had a direct line to a weapons factory with no morality or measure, alien concepts that were as yet meaningless to it. Mighty Oak watched as the thing stumbled into his treasury. He watched as it tried to see what was surrounding it and swayed like the drunken archaic it was. Here was where he held all those things that he despised about the mankind he had outgrown. Weapons, wealth, the toys of children, augmentations built from crude and unnecessary metals. Had he not shown them that it was all unneeded, that his way was better? No food was required, no insane infrastructure for power or homes, immortality as Earth itself had intended. Thousands of years for the asking, and only he had said yes and been brave enough to begin. Oh, he had lied. Nothing could prevent the mechanical slaves from destroying him and his until the numbers changed. Man's language would become chemical, the beauty of pheromones leaving no place to lie, no emotion hidden. Now he faced yet another menace that required a forbidden solution and pushed open the box that contained a multi-barreled, plasma coil-powered, belt-fed monstrosity. It would normally take a team of 2 archaic humans to wield, but he was stronger than they could ever imagine and held it comfortably in one hand. He was about to shoot the corrupted envoy where he stood, but part of him was still a scientist, and he had never seen anything like this before. Perhaps he could still be a hero, redeemed by the destruction of this thing and whatever it had brought to his world. Silver swayed as new senses searched the room, listing everything by labels his broken mind struggled to understand. Some small part of him registered the hostile with a primitive weapon, quickly dismissed as harmless. The mind sought silver, and so it scoured the room. Once it had mapped the piles of carefully stacked materials, it found the target of its search and went stumbling forward, ignoring all else. It was stacked in bars. His struggling mind found the word ingots, but he wasn't sure. That sounded like an insect. Silver, a wall of the stuff. He wasn't clear why he wanted it, but he reached forward and touched the nearest pile. The golden sheen on his arm surged back, seemingly reluctant to touch it, but he wasn't going to stop. He knelt down and laid his head across the cold metal and felt a small moment of peace. He closed his eyes and embraced the pile, ignoring everything else. Inside his mind, things began to grow calmer. His heart began beating a little slower until he felt drowsy. Without knowing it, he slid into a healing sleep as the first of a new kind. Mighty Oak stepped out of the shadow, his finger hesitating on the trigger. The creature had stumbled around, made a burbling sound, and then seemingly fallen asleep on the silver. This was not the act of some terrible foe, this was the act of an idiot. It seemed to be snoring. He stepped closer and raised the weapon carefully. Perhaps it didn't matter how it died. As long as he had a tale to tell and dragged the body out, no one would know just how ridiculous the whole situation was. It was, after all, the man that had destroyed his reputation. Mercy wasn't really required. Better still, all the weird augments might discredit the evidence, and might allow him to pretend that his rash words were a ruse or a lie. In that case, he shouldn't shoot him in the back. The head would be better, and close range in case it was checked. Which, he thought sourly, it certainly would be. Unless the fires reached the body first. He moved to the side of the unwanted envoy and raised the weapon. He was sure it had some clever name, some stupid and appropriate hero or god from the past. Mankind refused to let go of, but he was damned if he could think of what it was. A flickering laser asked him to confirm the shot. Then he pulled the trigger, and a burst of solid-state projectiles sought their target. He was thrown several feet backwards, even as the bullets worked out how they were going to impact the target. Since some of them had been fired towards the roof, it was down to human ingenuity that they could turn their path towards the target. The glimmers currently integrating into the silver wisp were watching something it had earlier deemed a threat, and reacted swiftly, snatching the bullets from the air and ordering them back to their origin. The order was a little careless as well. They were bullets. Smart weapons maybe, but not that smart. They riddled Mighty Oak, and he fell to his knees with a resounding thud. He could feel the bullets ignite. He hadn't checked the ammunition before he fired and had missed a rather large warning about incendiary. He didn't have any last words. He barely even had time for a last thought as his eyes latched onto the sleeping envoy that had arrived into his world and ruined him. Then the flames began to flicker and he was gone, reduced to smoldering embers. Silver remained resting on the pile, unaware that it was slowly being absorbed into his body. The pile diminished as the glimmers began sending silver to the wisp as well, no longer recognizing a difference between the man and his vessel. Slowly his color changed, and the twisting currents of gold became thinner and calmer, and he became a shade of steel gray. He slept on even as the fires grew closer. Chapter 5. Silverwisp awoke to a strange hangover. He looked around and seemed to be lying in a solid puddle of metal. He vaguely remembered looking for something. He remembered that there had been stairs, and he remembered that someone had been unhappy. He groaned as he sat up, and then he saw his hands. Gray. He waved them in front of his face, but they seemed to be his. Weird. Now either he was a zombie or his eyesight was shot. Or both. Then his brain reconnected somewhat to reality, and it came back as a series of broken alerts. Fire, death, and blood. None of the good things. He turned and found a patch of ash at his feet and some sort of weapon thrown on the floor. Where the hell had that come from? He didn't bother to continue the thought. The memory of fire filling his mind. He needed to get back to the wisp and call Earth. This, whatever the fuck was going on, needed a fleet, and he wasn't important right now. Maybe he'd find out why he was alive and down here later, but right now that wasn't going to save the colony. He stumbled through the piled boxes and slabs of metal, somehow aware of the contents. He would send somebody down here to collect some of the more useful things, such as the surprisingly advanced medical system. A thing he knew was banned in this world, no doubt kept for the chosen few. He pushed on. The room was crowded, the open roof showing the sky dark with smoke. The smell of death newly arrived on the world, a brutal and unwelcome addition. The acrid stench mixed strangely with the ozone tang of overworked med implants. The benches were filled with the injured and exhausted, all seeking help, seeking water and seeking hope. Rowan flinched as her burns were treated, the peeling bark and obscene smell gently masked by the bandages. Such primitive techniques, but still effective. Her medical implant was pumping pain relief and replacement cells into her system. Her nurse was silent and effective, but she was but one of many hurt, and she could see the strain on her tired face, the tracks of tears spilt hidden in washrooms and closets, the grief of watching younglings slip out of her hands. Too young to survive such trauma. She looked away, not wanting to embarrass the nurse, and tried to focus. Her memories of what had happened were still blurred and shattered, only flashes of pain and despair as she had fought the fire. Someone she wasn't sure who had told her that she had saved many. Many, but not all, not enough. She pushed herself off the bench and bowed to the healer. "My thanks, but I must return to the fires. We are too few as it is." The nurse nodded. "Try and keep your bandages clean and dry." She didn't waste any more words, already moving towards the next patient. She stood outside and felt nothing but hopelessness as she saw fire running across the horizon. Where to even begin? What little equipment they maintained for firefighting was for much more minor events, not an apocalypse or a war. She was about to make her way back to her charges when out of the gloom came a figure. It wasn't one of her people, so it was either a visitor or the enemy finally revealing its face. She felt her rage return. Silver decided to go and find whatever was left of the council, but no one was conveniently nearby. He assumed they were fighting the fires or dealing with the injured. He was a bit uncertain about which of their funny buildings dealt with what. They all seemed to be the same circle of walls with nothing to keep the rain off. He aimed for the largest one he remembered and walked into the smoke. It took less time than he thought it would, but he spotted it, and it was unburned and occupied. As he drew closer, he pushed past the trees and headed towards the entrance when he suddenly received a strong blow to the back of the head. This time he didn't fall, he simply turned around. The arboreal that had been caring for the young now was obviously hurt, the bandages telling a story. He held up his hand. "Would you please not do that every time we meet? People are going to talk." Rowan stopped even as she raised her fist again, surprised by the voice of the creature. She hesitated. "Envoy, what happened to you?" Silver put down his hand slowly. "Honestly, no idea. I was on my ship, then I was pretty much dead, and then I was underneath the council chamber with a new look. Or at least a new color. I haven't seen a mirror recently." Rowan stepped closer. "You don't look human anymore. Your face is steel and it's moving like water. I thought you were the enemy." Silver touched his face and it felt normal. He had other things to worry about. "Then it might be better if I don't go in and disturb things. Find someone to go to the council chambers and recover all the med gear hidden there. We will need it. Then find whatever council members are around and tell them I have declared a system-wide emergency. I'm going back to whatever is left of my ship to call Earth." Rowan faltered as she tried to match the words with this stranger, but none was nonsense. "You truly are the envoy? What hidden medical supplies? What does a system-wide emergency mean? I can fetch someone else, someone that—" Silver interrupted. "It means war. Do as I ask before I cause panic." He raised a smile, still unaware that it just created a ripple across his face. "We have no time for your council to debate if I am still the envoy, not if I look like a threat, and I imagine the medical supplies were for them. At least some of them, anyway. You just need to send people down there." He watched the confusion build and added, "There are weapons stored down there, too. You might want them instead of hitting people around the head." Old Habit sent his hand to check he wasn't bleeding. That silenced her. She remembered crying out for a weapon, even a knife, as the saplings burned. She wanted one. Badly. She nodded. "I will go. I will bring back enough to convince the people." Silver could hear the pain, the humanity that still beats in the heart of someone that could be repeatedly mistaken for foliage. A mistake he wasn't willing to make again. He reached up and held her arm. "You are not alone. Humanity is vast, and it will come to your aid. We have those treaties for a reason. I will bring help and fight beside you while we wait. There is hope." He released her and smiled, or at least hoped he did. "Go and fetch what you need. I'll come and find you when I have news. Perhaps you could help me deal with the council. Get me data on the injured and dead. Anything you think Earth needs to hear?" Rowan accepted that it might be better if whatever the envoy had become stayed out of the public eye. She nodded. "I'm called Rowan of the Grove. Seek me out when you return." Silver pulled out his comms and, despite it now looking rather odd, flashed her name and ID to his data. Hopefully he wouldn't need to waste any more time with civilians. "Very well. I'll call you. Best of luck." He turned and headed back into the gloom and the smoke, back to summoning the help so desperately needed. Rowan watched the envoy leave with a measure of relief and turned back in the hospital. She spotted the nurse that had helped her, now sagging with fatigue. She needed something. Perhaps hope and medical equipment would do for now. Silver knew where his ship was. He didn't know how, and he was beyond questions at this point. He could tell that he should be coughing and spluttering with the smoke, but he remained unaffected. Embers had dropped harmlessly onto his face, and the glimmers passed overhead. Small swarms of light heading in the same direction he was. None stopped to attack him. The wisp had lain half buried in the dirt, surrounded by the shattered trees from her final desperate descent. And so she remained. But now she wasn't a broken wreck. Now she shined like she wanted to rival the sun. Silver stood astonished as swarms of glimmers flew to the ship and joined, the ship visibly growing. He knew they weren't hostile in the same way, that he knew that the ship was waiting patiently for him to arrive. He needed to call Earth. His boss was going to be pissed.